Hello and welcome. I am Zerbraxi, part-time warrior of light, part-time failing middle school student, and today we are going to take a look at Bravely Default, considering it's confirmed for 2020. Super confirmed. So confirmed, there's a demo on it. Right now on the Switch. I'm going to give you my first impressions on it, and I hope you enjoy. Please watch. Thanks. Yeah, bye. Or not bye. Okay. Bravely Default 2 is exactly what it presents itself to be. It's a classic turn-based JRPG that attempts to iterate and perfect its core mechanics with just a little splash of innovation in the mix. The original Bravely Default introduced a new mechanic to JRPGs that the entire series is named after, the Brave and Default mechanic, but we'll get to that later on. Early impressions from the demo show that SquareEnix definitely knows what this franchise is, and how good it is at being classic and modern at the same time. Well, at least they would if SquareEnix actually published the game. Yeah, something kind of random is that the publisher for this game is Nintendo. The first Bravely Default was published by SquareEnix, its sequel, Bravely Second Endlayer, was published by SquareEnix and Nintendo, and now it appears that SquareEnix has just tossed publishing over to Nintendo entirely. The circle is finally complete. Anyway, let's talk about the demo. After we're warned that the demo is harder than the regular game, something we'll also address later, we're told to have fun. Fine, Bravely Default, but only because you asked so nicely. We're following 4 adventurers currently on a quest to save the world from a force that's been tampering with the 4 crystals of the elements. Yes, it's that classic story all the way from Final Fantasy I over 25 years ago. Speaking of which, shameless plug, but we're actually doing a playthrough of the original Final Fantasy over on my Let's Play channel if you're interested. It's going on right now. It's been a fun time. The 4 adventurers we have in this party are Princess Gloria, a sailor named Seth, Elvis the best character, and the mercenary Adele. You're able to spend a little bit of time getting to know each of these characters throughout the demo, whether it's by voiced conversation, the party talk feature, or in cutscenes. These 4 seem like they're a fun bunch right off the bat. Seth reminds me a lot of Zidane from Final Fantasy IX. He has this desire to help people and has a decently balanced pace of acting a bit headstrong while also knowing when to take things more seriously and cautiously. Gloria is definitely someone who's been raised by nobility, but she's definitely not the helpless trope that so many stories would make her out to be. Another comparison I can think of is she's more like a regal Colette from Tales of Symphonia. She's definitely focused on high-level ideas, fate, and the bigger picture. We also have Adele, who's a mercenary and rather straightforward in her actions. However, she's definitely not overly serious and loves to poke fun at Elvis, who's actually the one who's currently hiring her services. And then there's Elvis, who's just a cocky, lazy, and surprisingly reasonable guy. He just wants to grab a drink and relax at the bar, but knows there's more to do in the world. I'm genuinely surprised by the cast. None of them are tropes or cliches in the JRPG, or at least not entirely. In fact, I would say that for every trope they might represent in one way, there's another side of them that seems to contradict your initial impressions. They feel like real people with their hands forced into the actions of the story because they're aware of the larger fate at hand. They really, really need to help the world, and seeing this contrast between personalities, it's just nice to see in a game, especially a JRPG, which would normally fall into these character traps. Something also pretty nice to see is that in this demo, it doesn't take place within the main story of Bravely Default 2. I'm willing to bet that this particular boss fight, that these locations, and that everything you see within the demo will exist within the final release of the game. However, it's pretty nice to know that this plot itself is standalone just for trialing Bravely Default 2, and nothing more. It goes to show how much work the dev team is willing to go in order to present the game in the best light it can. The story that is told also is pretty straightforward, and makes sense that it's crunched for this demo. Essentially, this desert town is slowly being flooded because the tampering of the water crystal, etc., etc. The party is informed that a mysterious stone was noticed in the ruins in the desert, but no further details can be provided. It's a small little tale that's spun up here for the player, but it does provide a nice foundation for the world that exists within the Bravely Default universe. Aesthetically, this game looks strikingly similar to its predecessors. At first, I was worried that the art style would look poor, considering the models still keep the proportions of their 3DS counterparts. It's not that Bravely Default ever looked bad, but with other titles like Fire Emblem Awakening and the Final Fantasy III remake also using a very similar character model style, it definitely gives off this DS, 3DS vibe if you've held those handhelds. Despite that, everything does look really good for the most part. There were definitely some times in the main town where the models looked rather pixelated against the background. I thought maybe it was just their attempt at trying to add this desert haze to the look, and while I do think that is the goal, it just comes off really low res more than it comes off blurry. The NPCs in town also look pretty bland, and seem to stand out a bit too much from the player models. Again, I considered that this may be an intentional artistic choice to help make sure the player could stand out amongst the crowd, but even if it was, it just makes the NPCs look bad.
That's no good.
I really like the background art, and the contrast between that and the character models in the game. Many of the details in the environment in the cities and the open world, they give off this like really cool colored pencil style that really contrasts with the 3D polygonal models of the characters. Yet, that contrast actually provides this unique disconnect that actually works really well and is incredibly memorable. Take the main desert city, for example, and just look at the landscape and architecture. Everything looks flawed and smudged sitting in the distance, while the perfect renders of the player explores this imperfect world around them. I'm probably overselling it and overanalyzing this a bit, but it's just an observation that I couldn't get over. I just kept pointing it out, and I'm sure people around me were sick of hearing it. And of course, there's combat. JRPGs quite literally live and die by their story and their combat, because these are the two most prominent aspects of this genre. While Bravely Default dabbles in the classic era of JRPG combat, it definitely doesn't feel outdated or boring in any way. The same team behind Octopath Traveler is also developing this title, and their experience clearly shows through. The Brave and Default system return, which, well, they better, since that's what the whole damn game is named after. I'm pretty sure this is one of those mechanics, though, that now, since it's existed in JRPGs, it just feels so wrong to let it go in any new game coming out. It's kind of like Dragon Quest XI introducing the fact that attacking with rods and staves return MP to casters. Now that I've played with that mechanic, I need it in every game in this genre moving on. If for some reason you don't know how the Brave and Default system mechanic works, here we go. Bravely Default operates on a turn-based combat system. Each party member, and enemy by the way, has a resource called BP. On a character's turn, they can use the default action, which is essentially a guard or defend action, and it will generate 1 BP. Alternatively, if the character doesn't have negative BP, they can also take the Brave action. This essentially allows you to make 2 turns in 1 round. So if you attack twice, maybe cast Fire and Blizzard, or you can maybe say heal the party and then attack, you could use a BP to Brave into those 2 actions. In fact, you can actually take up to 3 Brave actions, allowing the character to make a max of 4 turns in the same round. This can be used in a variety of different ways, and this dynamic approach to combat allows for all manner of different offensive, defensive, and tech plays that can be adjusted for basically every situation. However, the big kicker comes into play that if you ever have negative BP, then when it would normally be your turn, instead that character's turn is skipped, and they generate 1 BP instead. This happens every turn until they finally reach 0 BP, and are neutral again. This is why you may not always want to go 4 times Brave every round and just go completely ham, because it can be insanely risky to have a party member out of commission for 4 rounds. And if you don't want to Brave or Default, then you can just use a normal turn. Congratulations on being boring. People who've played this franchise or Octopath Traveler can definitely tell you how even though this gameplay mechanic seems simple on the surface, it's a complete game changer. There are so many technical advantages you can take, and in turn that the enemies can also do as well. This creates this fun balance between a mechanic that can benefit you immensely, but also wreak havoc on your party if you're not paying attention or planning. In the Bravely Default 2 demo, this combat just feels as good as ever. My only real gripe with the combat is that the first hour or so in this demo is insanely brutal. When the demo warned you that it's harder than the base game, it's not kidding. There were battles where I'd have a party member take 1 turn, and then an enemy would just 4 times Brave and kill 2 party members immediately. This never happened to me in Bravely Default 1. While I appreciated the challenge, and it definitely made me explore the map a bit more to find treasures and gear, I'm not really sure what the benefit is that this adds as a demo. Veterans of the series and the genre will almost already know if they plan on picking this game up or not. However, this is an opportunity to introduce new players and to also then have them explore the fun job system. Newcomers may feel really put off of experimenting because the demo becomes incredibly punishing early on, and new players aren't going to want to reset their job progress when they need every advantage they can get in combat. The difficulty boils down specifically to these wasp and these snake enemies. I don't like any of them. No one likes wasps and no one likes snakes, so it kind of works out. They're vulnerable to certain types of damage, but their defensive stats are just so damn high that hitting them with the thing they're vulnerable to does less damage than a regular hit to most enemies. What makes this worse is that sometimes you can have 3 or 4 of one of these types of enemies be in the same battle as like 2 of the other. It's insane! I party wiped probably 3 or 4 times just from these enemies alone. It wasn't until I just got fed up and went and grinded for like 30-40 minutes that I finally fell on equal footing. No, I didn't feel powerful against them, it's just that I was finally supposed to be here. For the purposes of early representation on a demo, I think this was a really bad call. My worry is that more people are going to expect that the entire game will feel this helpless. And it just isn't an accurate representation. The final thing I want to touch on from the demo is the job system. Jobs are essentially classes that characters can switch to when they want. The demo allows for the Freelancer, the Monk, the Vanguard, the Black Mage, and the White Mage to be played. Once you've beaten the boss of the demo, you can also unlock the Thief job. Jobs are integral to this franchise, and their customization makes classes feel so good. On top of leveling your own character stats, characters can also level their jobs, which unlocks more abilities to use while they have that job equipped, on top of passives that can also be equipped to that character, regardless of the job they currently are. This is where some of the synergy between jobs really shines through, and the demo does a beautiful job of handling this. For example, the Vanguard job unlocks the ability called BP Default, which allows you to gain a BP whenever they're hit while defaulting. They also have a natural passive called Default Bonus, which increases their guard potential while in default. You can then stack your Vanguard with gear that increases the stat, like likely to be targeted, and you have yourself a true MMO-style tank in a single-player JRPG. What ends up happening is you can default on turn 1, have the enemy hit you a bunch that round, and then the next turn unleash this big 4x Brave and wipe them out. And if any of them do survive, you can default again, take all those hits again while saving your party members, and then supply that Vanguard with some more damage buffs, and you can now turn your tank into an offensive powerhouse. Another one you could do is have a character equip the Thief job as your main job, and Monk as its secondary. Yes, there are now sub-jobs, which is great. Have a Vanguard in your party use their ability to drop the target's defensive stat, then use the Monk ability to buff your own damage for a few turns. Next round, hit a 4x Brave to use the Thief's Sword Steal ability to increase damage even further, and then unleash massive damage into a single target. That, or maybe you just want to have your Black Mage level up White Mage to unlock the passives that allow them to regenerate MP when they attack with their weapon, or to reduce their MP consumption on spells. The more and more jobs that end up existing just makes this more and more crazy when you look at the combinations that they can use between different party members, and as the same character within multiple jobs themselves. Overall, as a fan of Bravely Default, this demo was a blast to play through. I spent just over 4 hours in it and completed everything I could possibly find, including all the side quests. I thoroughly loved that time playing, and despite the awkward difficulty spike at the beginning in the first hour or so, this demo is a great first impression of what Bravely Default 2 will be for fans of the franchise and veterans of the genre. However, as a demo to new players, I think it's a massive misstep. The difficulty is fine overall if they wanted to show that the game can provide a challenge. However, the demo should be hard later in the game, not right out the gate like it is. In fact, the demo gets easier and easier the more you play, rather than hard. So it's only downhill from the start. I fear this will drive off more players and it's going to attract new ones. Besides that, this is something I'm definitely going to be picking up in 2020 and this year, and I hope to be able to do a full review of the title. So did you get a chance to play the demo? Are you someone who's never played the series and the demo is your first impression? How did it feel? Is the difficulty actual problem, or is it just me being a complete wimp and being bad at video games? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments below. I love having a conversation with everybody. This has been it. You have been it. And the end is it. I wish I didn't suck at endings. Goodbye.